Hello, everybody. This is Unlimited Life Through Jesus. My name is Marita. This is the second word that I got from the Lord, while watching Northern Exposure, which is an old 90s television show. And I'm going to leave where I left off with the last one. I was going to combine it all in one video, but the first video ran a little bit long, and I didn't want it to become 2 hours. So here goes. In the second episode, Chris, another one of the main characters who runs the radio station, was in his right to keep in the life of this buck. And the buck I'm referring to is a 12 pointed deer. So he was out hunting and he came across a 12-point buck. And by all indication of the episode, the buck stood still because he knew it was time for him to be caught. Chris hesitated in catching the deer. The deer was in his sights, and it just stood there, and it was broad daylight. And the deer saw him, and he saw the deer. And it caused the character Chris to pause, because he marveled. Because most deer, once they spot a human, unless they've been acclimated to being around humans, they're going to run because they see us as danger. And rightfully so, because they don't want to become our food. But not this deer. This 12-point buck, just stood there and looked at him. It looked right back at him. Chris hesitated in catching the deer. The deer sensed it was safe from harm. And walked back into the forest. So this little stare, like, what you gonna do, which was basically the deer looking at the character Chris, what are you gonna do? And it was like about a good 100 feet away. And the deer like, what you gonna do? You got me. What you gonna do? The character Chris was taken aback, and this little stare-off lasted about a good 40 seconds to a minute. And then when the deer realized that he was basically marveled and surprised at his brazenness not to run, he let him go. He was also shocked at the deer's reaction. When Chris returned back to his trailer home, because he lived up in a trailer out in the woods in Alaska, there was a glass pint of Buck whiskey on his patio. Now, Buck is a brand of whiskey. And when he got back to the patio, because he had a little deck/patio area created in front of his trailer, his little Airstream, there was a pint of Buck whiskey sitting there waiting for him. He made the connection, and the next day he took the deer an apple. So he realized that was the deer. The show makes a lot of mystical references. So he acknowledged that the buck leaving the whiskey for him was a way of quid pro quo. One good turn deserves another, which is why it's illegal in government. It's illegal, but doesn't mean it doesn't go on. But anyway, so that was the deer returning in this mysterious and mystical episode, returning the favor for sparing his life. The next day he took the deer an apple. and he laid it on the stump where the deer was near when he spared his life. After he walked over the hill a few feet away, he found $50 in the form of one solid $50 bill, but it was $50. Hence the reference, it kept going back to buck, right? So anyway, he had just left the apple. He left it on the stump where he first encountered the deer when he spared his life. And going over the hill, the snow embankment. And he just happened to look down, and there is a $50. So he picks up the money, and he put two and two together, and he ran to see if the apple was gone, and it was, and there was nothing in sight. He immediately ran back to where he left the apple, and it was gone with no deer in sight. Finally, he took the deer the best feed corn money could buy. So, to return the favor again, he took the deer the best type of feed corn for a deer he could find, or an animal. As he was walking away, he stumbled and dropped his inherited rifle in the water, and it almost fell in the ice cold, and he almost fell in the ice cold water himself. So, again, he goes to the stump, has a brand new sack full of the best deer corn or feed corn you can find. He rips the burlap sack or sackcloth open, and then he's walking away. And as he's walking away on the edge of the embankment, he slips. And when he slips, he drops his inherited family heirloom rifle into the water, and he almost fell with it. And when he's looking, he's in disbelief. So he's looking like, where could it be? And so he decides to climb down or slide down into the ice cold water, because it's the middle of winter in Alaska. He's looking, and he couldn't stand long because hypothermia would have set in and he would have froze. So he gets out, and he runs back to where he had just left the sack of deer corn. And instead of all of the deer corn being gone, and along with the burlap sack, like the previous times, there was some deer corn left, and the burlap sack was there. Finally, he took the deer. Wait a minute, I read that part already. He tried to find it to no avail, as he had tried to get out of the water before he froze to hypothermia, before full hypothermia set in, and you can figure out what would happen. On the other hand, Maurice, that's another character in the show, who's well off, multi-millionaire on the show, former astronaut, all of this, suffered a fire at his house while recuperating from a broken leg. The fire caused the asbestos-lined insulation in his home to become hazardous. And he was, for those of you who don't know, asbestos, unless it becomes airborne, is totally harmless. But once it becomes airborne in the form of dust or anything, baby, watch out. So, what happened? Hazardous. And he was invited by Holling, a friend of his, to stay at his and Shelley's place. Reluctantly, he accepted Holling's offer. At first, I thought Maurice was upset because of him once being engaged to Shelley. Now, quick story backdrop. Holling and Maurice have been friends for years. They helped settle the town of Sicily, in which northern exposure is set it in, even though it actually took place in Washington State. That being said, Maurice had went to a beauty contest to judge the women. The winner of the beauty contest was Shelley. He took a liking to Shelley and brought her back because he had every intention of marrying her. Now, there is an age difference, but hey, slim pickings when you're in certain parts of Alaska. So basically, he went away to find a bride. He brings Shelley back, and she takes one look at Holling and decides that she wants Holling over Maurice. And she makes an offer for Holling to be with her, saying, if you want me, you can have me. And he did, and it caused a rift initially that lasted a long time between him and Maurice, and rightfully so. That being said, this is years after the fact. His leg is broke. His house just suffered a fire that got it needing to be abated. That needs an asbestos abatement performed on it in order for him to go back into the house in safety. So they was like, no, we'll come to our house. Come to our house. That's what Holland kept on insisting. She won't forgive me if I let you go to sleep on some couch in a radio station, which he owned the radio station in town, and that's what he wanted to do. So that's why he was reluctant. At least that's what I thought initially. Yet his main gripe was feeling beholden to Holling and Shelley. He was used to being large and in charge, and did not like feeling vulnerable, let alone dependent. Let me explain. Maurice owned a lot of things in town because of his wealth. He owned the laundromat. He owned the radio station. He owned what else? He owned lots of land, and he was always willing and dealing some type of business negotiations of some shape, form, or fashion. So he owned a lumber company because of the land. So he was used to being large and in charge and having employees and everything else. So whatever. His flowers, when the asbestos when the fire happened, it left his asbestos, which was in a greenhouse, exposed to the elements, because some of the glass to the greenhouse got broken out by the fire. In his greenhouse, he had his prized orchids. One of them that he named after himself, that he basically germinated and created himself, and he named after, it was called the Maurice or something, but it won first place in this orchid contest. And he had several different ones that had won several ribbons. So he was an award-winning horticulturist. So anyway, what happened? He was used to being large and in charge, and did not like feeling vulnerable, let alone dependent. His flowers, one which was named after him, died because he refused to ask for help in saving them. After he left Holling and Shelley in a huff. So what happened was, Holling and Shelley was really trying to just roll out the red carpet for him and make him feel as welcome as possible. They were feeling very hospitable, but they were overdoing it a little bit. Want to bake him cookies and want to do this, want to do that. Finally, and they also owned the bar/restaurant where they lived over. So he was getting ready to say, well, what I owe you for the sandwich? He ordered a Reuben sandwich. He said, what do I owe you for the sandwich? He's like, oh, that's about $10. He's like, I'm not going to charge you. You're a guest. And he's like, and while I'm at it, for putting me up, here's a couple of C notes that should cover it For those of you who don't know, C notes is $100. And he's like, no, I'm not charging you. You're a guest. We're happy to have you. And he got angry. And he said, oh, you just love what's going on, don't you? You just love it. You up here, you got the upper hand of me, and you're just letting it just... Basically, he thought that Holling was happy to have the one up on him. Instead of accepting it for what it was, which was a kind gesture, he thought that Holling was secretly wanting to say, I was able to put up Maurice. And I was able to take care of Maurice. And we did this for Maurice. And we did that for Maurice. His ego was talking. He found refuge on a couch at his radio station like he initially wanted to do. However, before he allowed any more of his prize orchids to die, remember, the one named after him died, and there was one other that died. He humbled himself and made an announcement over the radio to his patrons, radio patrons that is, to shelter them for him. What I learned in this episode is that, and one of the ones who came and got an orchid so that they wouldn't die on him was Holling. He just quickly told him what to do. And that was their way of patching up without having to say, I'm sorry. What I learned in this episode is that no one wants to be constantly, the dear Maurice, constantly reminded of the good deeds they have done for you. No one wants to be constantly reminded of the good deeds that they have, basically... No one wants to be constantly reminded of the good deeds that you do for them, is how I should have wrote it. It may lead to that person or thing resenting and or even hating you. Notice that the deer didn't eat all the seed, nor did it take the burlap like it did the first 2 times. Why? It got tired of Chris. And it wanted to say, look, I ain't even take all of it. Leave. Look, see. And that him losing the rifle and almost falling in the water himself was basically a warning. Leave well enough alone. We good. What I learned in this episode, what else? It may lead to that person or thing resenting or even hating you. On the same account, one should not allow their pride and or sense of independence to buck, literally, receiving help. The buck accepted it at first, and then after a while, it bucked against it because it realized that Chris was doing too much. Maurice reluctantly received the help in the beginning, even though he didn't want it in the beginning. But when they were doing too much, that's when he bucked against it. Let me read that part again. On the same account, one should not allow their pride and or sense of independence to buck receiving help from others, especially when they truly need it. What I learned is to be kind, but be mindful to not overdo your kindness, as it could be mistaken for you wanting to gloat over someone. And I can say I'm honestly guilty of this and didn't know what I was doing. Why people disliked me. And I was, again, this backs up what I stated up in the other vehicle about giving stuff away to people who didn't even like me. Ezekiel 16 overdid the kindness. The kindness came from my bottom of my heart in a pure place. But no one wants to feel like they are so beholden to you that they can never pay you back, because that makes them uncomfortable. That makes them feel like you can hold something over their head. What's coming to mind is when David, was it David who bought land? No, Jacob bought land. And they're going to say, no, 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 we'll give it to you. We'll give it to you. No, David too. David said, I will not give something to the Lord that doesn't cost me anything. David insisted on paying for that land. Also, it was Jacob. Jacob wanted to have a place, I think it was to bury Rachel. And he said, no, I'll pay for it. Why? Nobody wants to feel like somebody got something to hold over their head. Though it comes from a pure place, nobody wants that. It could lead to a contest that you are not aware of you signed up for. Just let bygones be bygones. Meaning, let it be. If you do something nice for somebody, know when to stop doing the favors and showing the gratitude. The only people who won't, or the only things that won't be annoyed by what you're doing are users. And you don't want those. So know when to pull back. And that's what I learned from this lesson. I hope it helps somebody else out there. And it leads me to, again, Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 31. And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely, this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. How you love a neighbor. If somebody's saying you doing too much, respect that person's right not to accept everything you're trying to do for them. Don't insist on it. Stop. Put yourself up in their shoes. Would you want to feel beholden to somebody forever, like you can never pay them back? No. Even if your heart's in the right place, put yourself up in their shoes for a minute to understand why they may be feeling dislike or distrust towards you, especially if you're overdoing it. Because truthfully, Holly and Shelly in the episode, they were doing too much. They were baking him cookies, even tucked him in bed like he was a child. They did too much. And I understand they did it because of his broken leg, but they were treating him like he was incompetent. Nobody likes to be treated like that, no matter what they got going on, whether they have a physical disability, a mental disability, whatever. Nobody likes to be treated like that. They want to feel their self-worth. The thing also is, people who are in situations where they really need help need to chill and accept the help that somebody is giving them, and don't try to make more out of it than what it is. Because at the end of the day, Maurice did need help. But unfortunately, 2 of his prized possessions, orchids, had to die before he admitted to it. No, for those of you prideful people, no one accepts help from someone. And that's the second message that I was led to give. And God bless, and I pray this helps whomever it's for. Bye.